Hi, I'm John Crossman and welcome to What Does a Video Cost? In today's segment we're going to talk about pre-production and specifically about how the talent and the crew impact the cost of a production. This is the third video in the kind of the subset of pre-production, and when it comes to talent, that can be one of two things. That can be an on-camera talent, or it could be a voiceover talent, a narrator as we call it. Some people call them voiceover artists, others call them narrators. Actually, it could be a third kind, and that would be if you're doing, let's say, a shoot in a factory, are you going to have to coordinate having people in the factory, having a specific, your best operator doing a specific chore, as an example that we're going to shoot. I used to do a lot of training for a grocery store chain. And so we would have store talent, people from the store demonstrating, the deli, or demonstrating, how to serve a customer or whatever. It wasn't a taxing role. And they, of course, would do that usually on their off time. So they would get, paid overtime or some special, stipend to help us out on the shoot. If you, are in a factory, can we shoot it during the day without interrupting, regular production? As I had mentioned in an earlier video, I did a series of OSHA videos which all took place in different factories. I shot in two different factories, but it was a multi-day shoot, and my goal was to not get in anybody's way. So sometimes you had to wait for certain processes to get done. I had already captured that process. Now, I'm waiting for the next step to be prepped so they can start, and then I can start shooting that process. Is there anything I can shoot in between waiting for, A and C to happen? And those people were not compensated. They were there during their normal shift. Believe me, when the bell rang, they left. None of them wanted to be on camera any longer than they had already been. And so these are the kind of things that you coordinate with any person that's going to be on camera. Now, an on-camera talent, like a spokesperson or whatever, obviously that's expands the scope, because probably there's going to be people above you that want to sign off on whoever is going to, in fact, be the face of the company. In this OSHA example I was giving you, they actually had someone from the HR department who worked in this area, and it was scripted, and then we had a teleprompter, and it took them a couple of times to get used to, speaking and reading the teleprompter. But they used an in-house person, so really there was no extra expense for that. Other productions I've been in, usually talent, on-camera talent like that, is a day rate. And so if you're shooting parts with talent and parts without talent, it would be a good logistical thing to plan to shoot all of your talent pieces in one day. Then it only costs you for that day as opposed to multi-days. And, a talent really can range all over from $500 to $1,000 up to, tens of thousands of dollars, depending on how well known the person is, how important you think they're going to be to the effectiveness of the video. Another thing in that realm is every once in a while I'll get a client that really wants to use a song, a popular song, or a song that was popular. This happens a lot when you're doing convention work. And if you go to AC/DC and say, I want to use Back in Black as part of our show open, well, it's going to cost you $100,000. Could cost you $500,000. If they like the company or what the product that you're selling, assuming you could explain it to them or they would know it, maybe they do it for free or next to nothing in comparison, maybe $10,000 or $20,000, or they might say, you can't use the song ever, don't ever talk to me again. I've been involved in productions where kind of both of those things have happened, and or you can pray for forgiveness instead of permission. That can always be dangerous. Of course, it depends on the circumstances. So that's different kinds of talent. And so the next thing we're going to talk about is crew. You're obviously going to have a camera person. The camera person needs equipment. in a normal corporate world that I have worked in, usually the camera person will have a sound setup like I have here, just a wireless mic. They'll have a couple of those because most cameras can take two inputs. They'll have a studio, not a studio, an interview lighting setup, which is usually a front light and a back light, maybe sometimes a side light. You can tell there's no side light here. I'm using a light that's in my room for my backlight, and so I just have a single light here. Again, this is not made to be pretty or an example of my best work. It's just made to share the information with you as quick as I can. And so many times the cameramen will do the lighting as well, if the lighting is pretty simple. And they can do the sound if the sound is simple. What makes the lighting not simple is a variety of setups, variety of room, a variety of conditions under which you have to shoot. And that takes the cameraman more time to just set up the camera. And while he's setting up the camera, the lighting guy could be getting his gear. The sound guy could be, doing whatever special things they have to do to get the sound the way you want it. So when I was shooting classrooms for years, we would travel with 2 cameramen and a dedicated sound guy. We didn't usually have to do a lot of lighting, especially as the cameras got better. Early on, when we did have to put a floodlight in a room, it was literally 1 light, usually 2 at the most, and the camera people would set those up. If you're going to go and do something that's critical for your company that look the best it can look, it's better to spend a little more money and get professionals to do it. Because while the cameraman can do it, he's focused really, or should be, on the picture. Is it in focus? Is it framed well? Has the person, moved in their chair? He can adjust, or she can adjust it, as it goes, because people move. It's just the way it is. He should be monitoring the audio, but he may not pick up every plosive or every rub against the mic or, something like that, where the audio person, that's all they should be listening to. Many times they don't watch the camera or the person talking at all. They'll sit with their facing the other way, and hopefully they're not on their phone and they're monitoring the audio. And if something goes wrong with wireless, you get interference from other electronic sources. In every room it has heating and air conditioning. If it runs the whole time, then we can record room tone and take that sound out. But if it starts and stops over the course of the shoot, then it gets more complicated. I just did an interview up in an airplane hangar a couple months ago, and they had one of these industrial heaters up in the back corner, and man, when that thing turned on, the interview stopped, because that's all you could hear. Even though we were, 50 feet away from it, it was like having a blowtorch, go off. And so it's easier to really just stop and wait until that is done, or find a way to turn it off while you're trying to do the interview, then go ahead and do the interview. And then the same thing with lighting. The more people you have, the longer it takes to get something done, because the light guy wants to keep tweaking, the audio guy wants to keep checking, the video guy is sitting there waiting, and blah, blah, blah. But if it's critical that, the person look like $1 million, then it might be worth it. Cameramen are usually a little bit more. I would say in the $600, it could be $400 to $600 a day range. Lighting guys are maybe a little bit less. Sound guys are just a little bit less. And so you're looking, just say as an average, you're probably looking at about $500 per day per person. Cameramen will get a little more than the other guys, but that's the gist. And then, of course, their gear has to be provided too. And so if a guy is really a lighting guy, he'll probably have a truck full of lights. But you pay extra for the lights based on how many you need. So that could be flexible during the day, but he's basically bringing his whole gear, so it's probably cheaper to pay a flat rate and just get everything than it is to try to onesie and twosie things. Sound guy is similar. Most of them have their own equipment, or you can rent them, and that gear costs anywhere from $200 to $400 a day as well, depending again on how much, what exactly you are recording and how complex the audio is going to be. Are you doing a panel where you have 6 microphones plus a microphone on a podium? That can all be done easily, but then you're going to have a mixer because you can't feed 7 microphones into a camera. So the mixers today will record as well as send to the camera a mix of the podium mic and the panel mics. So at the end of the shoot, your editor will get both the mix that's on the camera, plus he would have access, or she would have access to, the individual mics on the table. And so that's where you get into the scope and the complexity, where, you know, a simple seminar could be very easy to shoot and very hard to do the sound, or very easy to shoot and have complex lighting situations because you go to a hotel breakout room and all the lights go straight down from the ceiling. There is no real side light. So I have a light right here that's actually flooding my face. If I didn't, all the light in my room is actually coming down and I'd have shadows down on my face. And so a lot of breakout rooms and meeting rooms, almost everyone I've ever worked in, that's the way the lighting is. And so speakers tend not to sit in one place, even if they have a lectern. I mean, some will, but you may find yourself in a complex room that's an odd size or very big, and you have to adjust. You have to plan on bringing some extra lights so that people can't walk out of the light into the dark, which complicates the shoot. So that's talent and crew and kind of some ballpark figures. I am not an advocate for, you know, hiring one crew fits all. I do a lot of work as a solo cameraman, soundman, lighting guy. When we were doing schools, really the sound guy was in charge of the sound, and I would monitor the sound of my camera, but if there was a problem, there was a person there to take care of it. And there are a lot of moving parts in a classroom, and sometimes there's a lot of moving parts in these shoots, and so it's important to have a dedicated sound person that can really just run down those problems and fix them. The same thing with lighting. You know, we didn't have a lighting guy on these trips, but we did have a producer that traveled with us. Often we had a content expert that traveled with us, and sometimes people would travel for other reasons with us. So our crew could be anywhere from 5 to 7 or 8 people, and that impacts, you know, transportation, and all of this was done remotely across the country. So there's hotel rooms and all this stuff that comes into travel and meals and per diem that all come into things. So that's how the crew impacts the cost of your video. The bigger the crew, obviously, the more, but the crew is related to your original scope and how many locations and what kind of locations you're going to be in. And so that's it in a nutshell. We talked about talent and crew. In the next video, I'll try to get through it quickly, but we'll kind of bring all this together, see how they all relate, which you probably have a sense of at this point, and we'll talk about the overall budget and maybe get a little bit into how these affect post-production, which is pre-production, of course, is its own. It has a direct impact on production, and then those first 2 stages have a direct impact on post-production and the cost. So in the next video, we'll talk a little bit more about that, and so that you can get an accurate idea of what your video should be costing. My name is John Crossman, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.